Everyone meet Elad, our good old friend from Israel. Elad is also a DJ, right? And also has some other non software related hobbies.
This is all vinyls, you see?
It is all video,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, and he's presenting a very serious topic, right? It's adoption in a security company. So we'll see
Yes.
how serious that is.
Define serious. I'm not sure I know how to be serious. So yeah, I'll try.
Please try.
Yes.
Next half an hour and then.
Yeah.
Okay. Should we just start now, or is there a break or anything?
I will start now, and then we
Okay.
can have a break after the second talk.
Yeah.
Just to stay on time.
Okay. I'll do
Okay.
my best. Let's start
Yeah,
by
1
sharing
hour.
this, and let's see if you can see the presentation. Can you see it
All
okay?
right. Yeah, all good.
Cool. So, hello everybody. Nice to meet you, even though I can't see your faces really. My name is Elad Sofer. I'm from Israel. I'm a certified LeSS trainer. I'm a software developer, very passionate about those kinds of things. And today I'm going to tell you a story about one of my earliest LeSS adoptions I was involved in as a coach. I was involved in LeSS adoptions back in 2007 in Nokia Networks, but this is one of my first adoptions with a customer, external customer. So I don't have any vanity slides, so I'm not going to tell you too much about myself. I don't think it's very important who are my customers and how many events I've attended or whatever. So I'm just going to start. If there are questions, Alexei, is there anything I should pay attention to, or you're going to route it?
The question is whether you want to be interrupted with questions, or you would rather answer them in the end.
I don't mind being interrupted.
Whatever
Then makes more sense.
Something there which is about clarifying what you're saying, then I will jump in and read the question.
Cool, because I can't see the chat right now.
To read the chat because it's a bit distracting. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, cool. So there we go. Once upon a time, there was a company. I'm going to tell you a story about an adoption. It's a very big company. I'm not permitted to share any more details about it. So I will be vague. Maybe some of you can actually identify the company, but then I'm not going to respond whether it is or it is not the company that you are thinking about. So this company is still a very big company in the security domain, developing a pretty vast portfolio of products. And when I say a portfolio, I mean there's different product groups in there. The products are completely independent. And the product in question, or the product I was involved in, is a platform for managing the security aspects of a big entity like an airport or a mall or smart cities or stuff like that. So basically it's an operation center that collects data and inputs from many external applications, devices, hardware, cameras, whatever, smoke detectors, you name it, and collects and creates some business logics behind it and allows smart management of a big something, because it could be different things. So then this product group had called me and say, hey, Elad, can you come over? We have some challenges that we think you might be able to help us with. So first, the first question I ask most of my customers is, what kind of problems do you think I can help you solve? In this specific situation, it was a legacy product. It was more than 7 years old at the time. They had huge problems with regarding to quality, a lot of complaints from customers. They were not able also to deal with the dynamic market they were competing in. I guess some of you have experience with legacy products. They are very hard to change, and actually they create problems even to become agile. while at the same time there are smaller companies, smaller startups that respond really quickly to customer needs. So this company is in a situation in which they want to change things. They find it super difficult to do it for multiple reasons. They have this classic waterfall model of work, and they commit in advance for a set of features or content for about a year at a time. So it becoming growingly difficult to find themselves competing in the market, and gradually they're losing more and more and more business. Another thing that they had is they had zero visibility regarding what they are doing. So they didn't know what was going on, when will we be done, didn't have any data or indication that they could use to support smart decision making or stuff like that. So really a lot of mess and a pretty scary situation for them. They were even feeling risk of being shut down or stuff like that. So given the situation, we started, this is how I usually start any kind of LeSS adoption or something similar. I start with getting to know the organization, right? That makes sense. So I'm going to walk you through the organization. This is a really high level, just generic org structure kind of graphics. But as you can see, the structure is pretty classical. We have a head of the product group. This is like the highest level manager that manages all of the people and all of the departments and all of the groups. Pretty senior person. This group was split into a server group, client group, and mobile group. You could call it front end and back end, client being front end at that situation. Each group has some teams. Again, I'm not going to go deep dive into each team and numbers. I don't think it's important. There was a product manager, a single product manager for the entire group. That was the starting state, which eventually made it easier to transition into working with a single backlog and a single product owner, because that was, give or take, their starting state. They had a test group with a test manager, and it was split into 3 different areas. I would not say teams, because they were not really teams, but 3 different expertise or skills. We had the manual testing teams, which is, they call it a team, but basically it's a group of individuals that were allocated, quote unquote, to different teams for different tasks. So they were like service providers for the coders. We had the functional testing team. This is a team that was doing automation in some extent. So maybe an opportunity to explain. Since this product is integrating with really hundreds of different types of software and hardware, they had a good basis for automation on the system level. They had a lab that was pretty well equipped and had a lot of technical advancements and stuff like that. And they had the non-functional testing team. For those of you who don't know what NFT is, it's like the load, stress, performance, security, stuff like that. And a system architect, right? So that is, I guess, it's not unfamiliar to the majority of you, this type of structure. If I take a look at this is a way that I present the fragmentation of the organization. So this is something that we call a feature team adoption map. I'm not going to go into the actual tool itself, but I use it to represent the number of units that are required in order to ship a single piece of functionality or value. So in order to at the start state, this company has 7 different units that needs to be involved in each and every one of the features. I'm not sure if I need to explain to you, because you are in a LeSS conference, so I assume that some of you or most of you already understand the problems with that. The amount of queues and the amount of sequences or steps in the sequence. prevent agility. Basically, it's very hard to become agile when each and every item needs to go through 7 different units. The coordination efforts are huge, and the complexity level is just awful. And of course, the problem which often results, this structure results in, is the late integration and the late discovery of said truths. So that is the start state. So the presentation is titled how to move or change from waterfall to agile in 3 steps. So here is step 1, okay? What we did with step 1 is that we had a real problem. As I presented the concepts of what does it mean to be agile and what does it mean to be agile at scale, so to actually have business agility within a big organization composed of in this case, about 9 teams, was so hard for them to grasp as people who are coming from a very waterfallish kind of culture and process, that I could not personally get enough buy-in for them to make the necessary change. I know that, I'm telling you this because I know that today, I think I would have been better in getting the buy-in. Plus today I have more tools and even a framework in my mind to help them explain the ideas. Because when I was working with that organization, it was more than 10 years ago, the LeSS framework did not exist. So I had my less knowledge of the LeSS framework because I was, I know, guided or mentored by Bas Vode and the group in Nokia Network. So I had the ideas and the understanding and the system thinking and the lean thinking behind it. I was not good enough in explaining it and getting the buy-in, so they were scared. So we decided to start small, which is something that I was like the classical go-to approach for me. Something looks scarier or looks something we're not sure if we want to do or not. So let's take a bite. Let's start small and see what happens. And that was pretty easy to convince them to have an experiment. So we created a 1 Scrum team experiment. Given the fact that they didn't know what it means to be iterative, they didn't know what it means to be cross-functional, they didn't know what it means to be self-organizing and stuff like that. I did get enough buy-in to create this experiment of a single Scrum team. So we created the single cross-functional feature team without a team leader. And we specifically requested for people who want to be a part of it, to have a passion to try it out and not allocate people or nominate people as based on their skills and so on and so forth. And we also, of course, as you'd expect, decided to time box the experiment for a period amount of time. For this specific example, it was 6 sprints, which is 3 months. And really, I'm not, to be efficient and effective with the time, I'm not going to tell you a lot about this pilot or experiment that we did, because it's not that interesting. I think that by now, most of us understand that 1 team model in any type of agile framework would probably outperform any waterfallish approach. It's easier to get there. It's also de facto today it's the go-to approach anyway. So it's not that interesting for 1 team to be working this. Yes, they did need to learn about how to work as a team and stuff like that, but I think in the scope of talking about LeSS, it's not that interesting. So I'm going to totally skip that, the step 1 of creating the experiment. Now, it was really a huge success. So management was so happy after this experiment. It was the first time in their history that they actually witnessed a functionality being added to the product in a continuous manner. They were really, really used to this, not seeing anything for 7 to 9 months, just staying completely in the dark and praying and hoping for the best. So The huge success, as I said, most of us understand, I think it's pretty easy to get huge success compared to waterfall with the one team, which led us to step 2. Okay, so we get enough buy-in, and now we want to prepare ourselves to the adoption or redesign of the organization to match their business agility needs. Okay, so the first thing that I did, is I educated everyone. 10 years ago, again, Scrum knowledge, not very common. People don't find it intuitive as today. Even today, still training is important. Back then, it was way more important. So we did 2-day Scrum training for everyone in the group, about 50 people. It was it was two separate sessions. And then I did a 1-day scaling agility workshop for managers. And I'm telling you that because today it would probably look very different. The Scrum training would either be there or not, because some of them, majority of people I meet actually are pretty much familiar with Scrum, so maybe it would be just a 1-day overview. The scaling agility, however, would grow into 4 or 5-day workshops to really discuss the issues at depth, the organizational and design issues. But I'm telling you the truth as it was, and of course you're going also to be seeing some of my bad choices and advice that I gave this product group. So after that, we did an initial backlog refinement workshop, and that's nice because it correlates with the previous talk. It was a 2-day workshop with all teams, everyone involved in a very, like a big room thing. We used open space, we used Lean Cafe, we used all of those facilitation techniques in order to get an understanding of the business needs in the teams. If you remember, the teams are very technically skilled oriented. So there's the front-end team, the back-end team, the mobile team. None of them has ever been challenged with, this is our business, this is the why, this is why we want to do things, and so on and so forth. So it was a great experience, I think, for everyone to finally become engaged with the business of the coding that they are doing, or testing that they are doing, or whatever. Sorry for that. And then we also talk about a new structure. So as I guess majority of you understand by now, that agility is impacted strongly by the organizational structure, right? Culture follows structure, and so on and so forth. So we workshopped around creating this new structure of the organization based on the amount of people that we have, and based on the priorities that we needed. So we created, or we decided that we want to create 7 cross-functional feature teams. We want to split them into 2 requirement areas, 1 in each site. So I think I didn't mention, the group was split into 2 sites. They were in the same time zones, but they were in different locations. We had the single product owner, which was, again, awesome. One of my struggles today with many of my customers is actually shifting back to a single product owner. Unfortunately, I'm seeing way too many organizations that find that multiple product owners is something that they want to do. In order to create the structure properly, we did a self-designing team workshop. Now, if you don't know what it basically is a workshop in which we let the team members create the teams on their own. We define boundaries, and within those boundaries, we facilitate a process that results in a new structure. But it was not a structure that was decided by like the management sitting in a room and like moving toy soldiers from one team to the other. We let the teams take ownership over choosing in which team they are and where they think they can contribute and how. And again, that's a topic for at least a 1-hour talk. So you can read about it. I think in the LeSS website there are some links. Maybe we can share them with you. And we change seating arrangements to match this new structure, right? So structure is super, super, super important. I can't emphasize. Another thing which I heard you mention in the previous talk, and I cannot emphasize enough how the definition of done is one of the most important elements in Scrum, in my opinion. Not knowing what is the standard that I'm building against, what is just checklist that I know that I need to comply with, or not having this kind of across the organization standard level of quality will generate tons of problems, both at the customer end and at the vendor end, so at the software developer end. So given the fact that they are not the most advanced technically organization at this point in time, the definition of done includes coding, code review, automated functional test, documentation, and some other small things. It does not include unit testing, it does not include any non-functional test, and it does not include regression tests at all. So that means basically that whenever a team declares something is done, it's not really done. It's missing really critical elements in order to be able to ship it to the market. However, these guys, it took for them 2 weeks from the moment they decided they want to release until they have a package ready to be shipped. So that is already a huge improvement if they can go into get to the definition of done within one sprint. Amazing success. So if you remember the fragmentation level from before, now we shifted to 3. So basically we have a feature team that can cover the definition of done, which includes many, many, many things. It still does not include a non-functional testing team and the tools, which I didn't mention because it's not that important, but think of it as a system team or DevOps team or whatever you want to call those nowadays. But they are dealing mostly with infrastructure, the tools team. So for this discussion, they are not super important to talk about. Still at the design phase, we identified impediments that could create problems for us. I think, again, there were multiple impediments. I think those are the things you are most commonly see. So first of all, and it's not in the order of importance, team members did not have any available channel to communicate with customers. Actually, they didn't even know who the customers are or how they use the product. Maybe a little bit, some of the people from the front end, from the client side, but again, not so much. And we did agree that it is important to get the teams to become more customer-centric and have them create a communication line with the customers. The decision was, for now, at the time, to nominate the architect to own this problem. So we asked the architect to become the bridge or the proxy to the customer, and B, his second goal was to help build the relationship between the customers and the teams. So this is what we did for that. The mobile team had only 3 members and a team lead. Now, if you remember, we have 7 cross-functional teams, and if we want to have all of them be able to provide value in the product, given the definition of done and given the fact that they're working end-to-end, we find ourselves now with 3 teams without any mobile skill or knowledge. What we did for that, again, was a quick fix, is we nominated the team leader, the ex-mobile team leader, as a component mentor. And the role of the component mentor was not to develop code, was not to write code or develop any new features. His first priority was to help other teams learn about mobile development and provide support for them to be able to contribute in those areas of the code. Unfortunately, team leaders were not a good fit for the Scrum Masters. Again, this is something that is unfortunately very common. the skills and the attributes and the experience that we are looking for when we are looking for Scrum Masters is often not what people used to look when they promoted developers to become team leaders. So those people were educated based on command and control and micromanagement and all of the things that they were taught, classic Taylorism. We have decided to coach them. So decided that I will work with them one-on-one basis to help them grow into a Scrum Master. I'm saying wrong here with an exclamation mark because often this is the wrong solution. It might work, sometimes it does. The amount of time it takes is huge. Now, very important, don't translate what I'm saying as let's fire all team leaders or anything like that. Hell no. These are often very talented people, very skilled, know what they are doing, and so on and so forth. So try to find, my recommendation right now is try to find a place in the organization in which they can contribute mostly, but definitely don't fire them. It's a shame. The office layout, as in many offices, didn't have enough big rooms because they were sitting in 3-4 people room, and we had sometimes bigger teams. So we allocated adjacent rooms. We tried to do our best. Didn't always work, but we were aware. And the definition of done, as I stated, is missing basic elements. We know all of that. So step 1, experiment with Scrum. Step 2, prepare and analyze and understand the organization and decide where we are going to go. And then step 3 is just do it. It's the large-scale Scrum adoption. So what do? We create the new structure, right, which we prepared for, and then we have this single product owner with single product backlog, which there already existed, so our life is easier. It wasn't prioritized, but that was pretty simple to work on. And we just say, okay, start. After the training, just start playing with the idea of Scrum. My message was, especially to management, don't expect much, because they are now learning a completely new game. It works completely different, and indeed, there was a major perceived drop in productivity. Why am I saying perceived? Because if you look at the progress bar, then at the first 3 sprints, they had nothing done. They could not get any product backlog item done. It was, on one hand, pretty frustrating for the majority of people. On the other hand, I think it visualized, or it materialized very well the distance, the mental distance between where they were and where we want them to be. So a lot of noise, people are complaining, what is this Scrum? It's not working. It's like an experiment with humans. Why are you doing it? Resistance to change. People are threatening their managers, I will quit, and stuff like that. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's not a fun atmosphere to live in. On top of that, the Scrum Masters, which were not real Scrum Masters, were actually supervisors, so still micromanagers. So if it's not enough, the low maturity of the team, it did not even have the right environment to evolve. Think of as if you have a plant and you don't give it water, it's very hard to evolve it. So if you want to grow a self-organizing team and you put a Scrum Master who is a micromanager and an ex-leader, then you don't create the right environment, which will make it even harder. Also, technically, they are not very skilled. Test-first approaches, mob programming, even pair programming, continuous integration, stuff like that. They didn't have neither the experience nor the knowledge how to do it. So, as expected, it resulted in a mini waterfall. So inside every sprint, there was some design, then some coding, then afterwards some testing, and so on and so forth. Of course, that often results in getting nothing done because the bottleneck of testing at the end is too hard to deal with. And teams are so much busy with how difficult it is. So there's also almost no collaboration, no coordination, no synchronization between the teams. They are so occupied with it's so hard and complaining and stuff like that. No one really had the energy. Even more so, and I think the reason I'm giving you this full list is so you see that just by introducing Scrum at scale, so many problems that are organizational problems that they have nothing to do with Agile were surfaced, which is great, but it's hard. So it's important to keep that in mind. So previously, right, all testing was centralized. Now we have 7 teams trying to test their product backlog items to move them into the done column, so-called, and they are fighting about time with the testing equipment. Now QA manager, who was previously managing the people, right? You will be allocated to this, you will be allocated to that, and so on and so forth, didn't really know what to do. She was very, very puzzled about the role. Now meetings are long and ineffective, and people sidetrack, and the atmosphere is really, really lousy. I'm creating a nightmare scenario. I'm presenting a nightmare scenario because it really was a nightmare scenario. Architect, even though teams were asking him questions all of the time, he was a bottleneck because he also had some other tasks that he needed to do, and he also got a little bit impatient. On top of that, external conflict with sales and marketing. We need a Gantt chart. We need a fixed date. We need you to commit to content. And myself, I'm pushing against that. So I'm saying, let's see, maybe, and they are getting also frustrated. Luckily, I have the backup of senior management. So somehow it didn't blow up in my face. And remember, there are 2 sites. So if there is no synchronization between the teams, just imagine what happens with the 2 sites. Previously they had to talk to one another, right? Because they were only a component team which had to move something from that team to the other team. Now they feel as if they are completely isolated. They don't need help from anyone except maybe from product and the architect. So between the 2 sites, it's completely disconnect. And then all of this nightmare scenario, and a question that I was asking at the time, do you want to continue? Said, look, what's going on? Do you have the commitment and the passion to continue? Because it's going to be hard. And the answer is yes. Luckily, we had the pilot, right? And the pilot was still fresh in the manager's head. It was like 2 months ago or something before of that point in time. And they still remembered what they experienced and this iterative thing, and seeing the product grow on a bi-weekly basis is something that they were so bought into that they said, yeah, let's continue, even though it's super difficult. Step 4, I said 3. We'll talk about it later. So I just gave you a walkthrough of doing the experiment, preparing, and then rolling out, and then I present or draw this nightmare picture of reality. What is step 4? Step 4 is the moment of joy. At the 4th sprint, so at the end of sprint number 4, all teams were actually able to present done functionality. All teams in the sprint review were able to show something, and were able to take pride in what they do, and were able to share their learnings and stuff like that. Planning for sprint 5 was done in 2 parts. So the first part still was wrong having the Scrum Masters and the product owner. The second part where most teams were doing it isolated, but I remember that I identified an opportunity for two teams to collaborate. So I tried to suggest that they do it, and they did. And being a coach, and this is maybe another tip for you guys, if you see success, use it to your advantage. If there is success, you can actually harness the opportunity for learning. It's more difficult for people to learn from failure because they are in a defensive mode. But when you are with the joy of success in your heart, learning is easier. And that was my first opportunity to introduce an overall retrospective, which we had representatives of all of the teams. And the outcome of this retrospective is this. It's not a copy-paste kind of thing, but this is the outcome of our shared retrospective. So we talked about the fact that teams are trying to get a testing lab allocation. And then they brainstormed it, and they were really smart people. So they were able to split the lab into two labs. So I'm not going to go into queuing theory, but we actually reduced the queue, right? If we have two different shared resources. The teams decided that having a synchronization meetings for all teams twice a week is a good idea. And even the Scrum Masters decided to start a community of practice. So this is pretty, in my experience, pretty impressive as an outcome of one retrospective. This is a lot of improvement. And at this moment, we are starting to see this gradual ongoing improvement, this inspect and adapt, this movement of learning. And after 6 months, we see an increase in visibility. And let me explain what visibility means. I can know for a certain amount of probability, this is what is going to be shipped at this sprint. This is what we are going to ship in X amount of time. And again, this is of course not accurate, but it did give them some data which they can make decision based on, like priorities decisions and stuff like that. Meeting times were dramatically increased. So 5-minute dailies, short sessions, like previously you mentioned, refinement is not a meeting, refinement is an activity or a process. They didn't need a meeting for refinement anymore, or maybe a sync meeting, but not a lot more than that. They figured out that the testers, those testers that previously did only manual testing, have less value. And so, by the way, this was an initiative of one of the developers in one of the teams. He actually created a course for the developers to learn how to write test fixtures and how to work with, for them, it wasn't Cucumber, it was SpecFlow. It's the .NET alternative for Cucumber, but using Gherkin and BDD and testfits, and things start to rapidly improve. We have communities of practice operating, not only the Scrum Masters, because starting to encourage others, and we are seeing real learning culture. All of these things are definitely not trivial to achieve. They show a lot of commitment and a lot of will to becoming better. So learning culture is definitely in the house, as we say it. After 1 year, which is more or less when I left them, the fake Scrum Masters were either replaced or changed their attitude. Some of them were actually able to adopt this new mindset. Some of them did not, and they were then replaced. The definition of done expanded to include the non-functional testing. Now, how am I on timing? So I don't have time to explain, but they did something pretty nice technically. A QA manager was quit and the role was eliminated. She is an amazing person. I'm in touch with her still today. Appreciate her a lot. And she realized that she has no value in the current structure. Teams now communicate directly with customers to a level in which if I as a team member have a question, I know which customer I should call or email or whatever. That was really having the teams becoming customer-centric and business-focused is a pleasure. I did tell you that cycle time for delivery was 2 weeks. They were able to reduce it to less than a day. And that is in 1 year. It's pretty amazing. Automation, coverage, so on and so forth. Huge success. So the story should end now, and they lived happily ever after, right? Of course, that is not the case. It's very hard to be able to do that for a very, very long time. It requires a lot of support and stamina and will. And of course, we know in our industry, we also have the challenge of people leaving companies every year. So we have to maintain this ongoing flow of culture and making sure that the culture stays there. And I'm not going to tell you the rest, what happens after. I do know what happens after, but I'm not sure it's important at all for the sake of this presentation. Plus, I have 3 minutes. So I said 3 steps from waterfall to agile, and then I wrote 4 steps, right? So it's not interactive, so I don't have the ability to see you raise your hands or anything. So I'm just going to skip the question of which step would you cut, would you remove? And my answer is pretty simple. The single team Scrum experiment was, and I'm going to be very direct and blunt about it, a waste of time. I know I said it allowed for us to continue, it allowed for us to get the sufficient buy-in and so on and so forth. However, it was a waste of time, because if all we wanted to do is get the sufficient buy-in from management, right? That was the goal of that. We could invest in getting buy-in from management and invest more time in having them understand the ideas and the concepts and so on. Because that delayed the entire process in 3 months at least. And it costs a lot of money, which I think investing in getting the buy-in would cost much less and be more value-centric towards the organization. However, I make mistakes. So basically, that is my story. I'm good with times, right, Alexei? Yes, I'm perfect.
You are much better than we were before. Thank you for showing us the example. We have 2 questions that were on the way, but I didn't want to interrupt you. One was about your definition of done. The question was, why did you actually end up removing the unit tests from DoD?
Okay, so we didn't really remove it. The thing is that the teams were not even familiar with the term 10 years ago. So unfortunately, I was presenting a situation in which we couldn't put it in the definition of done, as nothing would have been ever done because the teams don't have the skills of doing that. Mm-hmm. So I hope that answers. I don't know who asked it, and you can follow up or anything like that. But we didn't choose to remove it. It was just definition of done is a mirror of reality, right? It reflects what the team knows and can achieve, not only what we want. Right. So yeah.
And there's a humorous question at the end of your presentation, like what happened after? Did they adopt it safe or what? Ha ha ha.
Yeah. Okay, if we have time. Okay. So they continued with that approach. Again, I would not call it less, as it did not have a name back then, but it uses the same principles of system thinking and seeing the whole and whole product focus and customer centricity, which we now have nice words and graphics for. They continued for about 2 years more. Then came a new CEO to the organization, and they just decided that the whole organization is adopting SAFe. As a result of that, the product group, the head of the product group quit. As he said, over my dead body, I will not be joining hands with that. He moved to another organization, which became another customer of mine. So overall, for me, It was a good result for them, not so much.
I also have a question. You told that there was the architect who was a bridge between the teams and the customer. Like there is a risk, people are lazy, that they used to have this bridge all the time, and they will just start use this habit of proxy between. Like, how did they fix this, or it was just
like... Yeah. So when that's my approach. When I work with an organization, I take a very deliberate approach of doing things. So I don't like shooting to the stars or just saying let's become better. As I presented it in the presentation, when we did the design phase, we wrote down the top 10 impediments that we want to get rid of in the next year. And we deliberately worked on each and every one of them. And of course, one of the people involved in creating this new reality was the architect. So he knew that his goal was to build a bridge over time. We didn't expect it to happen tomorrow. Yeah, so just hard work.
Right.
Christoph is asking, was the increment integrated at the end of the sprint?
The increment was not fully integrated, no. When I left them, they still required 1 day of sort of connecting all of the dots and packaging it and all kinds of other stuff like legal and stuff like that.
All right.
More questions, guys?
Just to finalize, maybe. So this was a case that you've done some years before, right? As you've mentioned.
Yeah.
You've highlighted several things that you wouldn't have done. Just maybe what would, as a bottom line, like what are one or two things that you would have done completely different now, with, like, because you've learned, I guess, a lot during these years?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned I can maybe even package them in a package. I today, for anything regarding structure, and structure is roles, is organizational structure, is stuff like that. I would not go to any kind of incremental approach or any gradual evolutionary approach. I would just do it from the start, and if I don't have sufficient buy-in to do it from the start, then I would invest in getting this buy-in. For the simple reason, it just takes so much longer. So we want to be agile, but we want to do it fast. So I think that would be a main thing. I think Scrum Masters is something I would, again, from the start, find the right Scrum Masters. This is probably one of the challenges I'm facing today with the most of my customers. It's really hard to find, even internally, people who are interested in becoming Scrum Masters.
Right.
So your focus is on organizational improvement, is on people, is on coaching, but I want to be a developer. So it's interesting.
Right, which is not so bad. I mean,
yeah, it's great. Developing is fun. I love development. I write code even today, right? So even today in the morning, I wrote some code. So it's really hard finding those people-oriented people or process-oriented people. And more I'm seeing organization starting to realize that we don't have to find the Scrum Masters in the technical side of the organization. We could maybe get them from other areas of the organization. In big organizations, there's so many departments, even, and don't quote me, it's recorded, even from HR.
Yeah, I just want to say it, like, especially from HR.
Yeah.
All
right. Thank you, Elad, for being with us today. Thank you so much.
Wait,
thank you.
I have another slide. I have another slide for thank you. Let's, we have to, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.